We hear that all the time. You can't miss long here. You can't miss long here. Well, at Riv, you have less control over whether or not you're missing long, because sometimes you can land it on the front of the green, but if you're coming out of the rough or you're downwind, it can still bound through the green and give you that long miss that you really don't want. So you have less control there. Then you have less control around the green, whether you're coming out of the rough, whether you're trying to spin the ball. The ball's just going to take such a strong first hop that you have less control there. And that also means you have less control of the type of putt that you leave yourself with. So sometimes you can just have a round where, like, 8-footer after 8-footer, you have to play 3 feet outside the hole. And like, your chances of making that putt are always going to be less than if you can control where you miss, chip it to 8 feet, but now you've got a straight-ish uphill putt that you only have to start at the left edge. So I think like that's been a theme over the last few years here, is the firmness of the greens just gives players less control, and they might have more control this year with how soft things are. So that's, another one of those aspects that I'm really curious to see. And I think that could actually help around the green play be more predictive this year as well, where in the past around the green play has been like really important in terms of you need to do it well to perform well here, but we haven't had much of an ability to actually predict who is going to gain strokes with their short game. This year, it might be a little bit more predictable.
At Mayo Experience.
Week 2 of back-to-back signature events, the Genesis Invitational. We're going to be breaking down the DraftKings picks, the ownership, going through some drafting, all that fun stuff. Alex Blickle from FTN is back on. Blick, tell everyone about the Discord. I'll even put the link down in the description to the Discord as well. I'm in there now too, so you can come chat with me if I ever decide to open it up.
Yeah, there you go. The Discord's been really cool. I think the number one thing I'll say is, we really try to create this like community where we're all collectively interested in learning about this game that we play as best we can. So the DFS, props, pick 'em, we're just kind of always searching for the edge. And we kind of have an example of that for the show today, where you actually posed a question to me about a certain type of each way bet that we can do in PGA, and like that's that's obviously like not part of the Discord, since you're the one who asked me, but that's the sort of thing that we do all the time. So whether it's looking at interesting things about ownership in DFS, or looking at how contest sims are affecting everything, we're just constantly asking questions, trying to find the answer, and then talking a lot in the Discord about, okay, now that we have this information, how can we use it to actually make more money playing these games that we love?
Well, we have I've been enjoying the research topics that we've been talking about at the beginning of each show, and trying to break that down to find an edge. Of note for people who are sub to the Rabbit Hole and Fantasy National, the Fantasy National lineup generator is back in business. You can start using it, moving your shares around. I, for one, am very excited, Alex, because that's how I build. A lot of people like to use optimizers. I like to think that I know better than the computer to varied results, but it is the best lineup generator for, here are the guys that I want, make me lineups with these guys, don't put anyone else in. It's the greatest.
I love that. That fits my strategy as well, because I'm pretty much exclusively a single entry guy at this point in time. The only time I do play multiple lineups is when I've won multiple tickets into one of the contests, and then like usually the week prior to actually doing that, I will run like a test run where I build 3 lineups or something like that. But yeah, so as a hand builder, I'm the same way. Like, don't give me somebody that I don't feel conviction for. So I want to feel great about every single guy in my lineup, which means I want an optimizer to give me those guys. And you can do that with the FTN optimizer as well. But I think whatever works for you works. And I think whether you're using an optimizer or not, the starting point is just knowing what works for you and what kind of style of DFS player you are.
Yeah, I know that. I was greatly disappointed. I've been playing fewer lineups in GPPs because of this, because I didn't have the main way that I like to build lineups. It's back, and the reason that it got reconstructed is because we're parsing it over to the Rabbit Hole as well. That should be coming soon enough, so you can just access it from betspertsgolf.com/Mayo to get yourself a discount if you want to get in on that. What I asked you about, Jeff brought it up on the show, and I've been curious about this for a while because I see people playing each-way bets around the business, and I'm someone who plays a ton of each-way bets, be it 5 places, 8 places. If people do not know what an each-way bet is, it's not even theoretically, it's actually literally 2 bets. So last week, let's just take a prime example and let's shift the odds to make it easy for everyone. Seb Straka, 50 to 1 to win the tournament with 8 places. What that means is half my bet goes to the 50 to 1, half my bet goes to the 8 places. And the 8 places are calculated. It's a top 8 finish at 1/5 the odds of the outright price. Now, if you do 5 places in some spots, you'll get 1/4 the price, and the outright is usually bigger. There is a weird bet at Bet365 where you can get each way 3 places at 1/5 of the odds. However, the outright odds get super juiced up. So this was the discussion that Jeff and I had on Monday, that I was looking at Shane Lowry. I could bet him 70 to 1, 70 to 1 with 8 places at 1/5 those odds on the 70 to 1. Or I could take the 3 places. I would get him at 110 to 1 as the outright, and then 1/5 of the 110 to 1 for only 3 places. So you would have to come inside the top 3 to get paid on that end. And to me, it just kind of felt like a sucker bet. But I wanted you to run the data behind it to show what it actually means, and kind of seems like it's a good bet.
It does seem like it's a good bet. In fact, it seems like it's a great bet. And it's worth mentioning, like, it does depend on the player to some degree, and it does depend on the odds that you're given. Because one of the things I noticed is, like, I when doing the math, I was literally just copying down, all the players and the odds. And there isn't an automatic where, like, if he's 40 to 1 in this market, he becomes 55 to 1 or 60 to 1. There are guys who were at longer odds in the standard each way market, the 1/4 for 5 spots. I don't know if it's standard where you are, but that's the standard where I'm at on Bet365. But then they are at lower odds in the 1/5 for 3 spots market. And so there was like a little bit of that you have to take note of. But there are, man, like, there are very few instances. In fact, I'm not sure there was a single instance where the expected value of the bet gets worse when you go from the standard 1/4 for 5 spots to this new, like, 1/5 for 3 spots with the juiced outright odds. Bad bets remain bad bets. Good bets become outstanding bets. And then there are even a category of guys who are high volatility players, like Cam Young, like Sam Burns, like Justin Rose, who go from a slightly negative expected value to like 17%, 25% positive expected value. So this is a really cool find. And we're going to talk more about this math and what the implications are, and how, like, it is great for us. And it's something that anyone who has access to it should use. But I also think that there's like almost like a behind the scenes, or just a greater takeaway here, which is, ask these kinds of questions, because you just having, like, the curiosity to look through all these odd boards, or maybe it was even Jeff who had the curiosity to look through all of the possibilities and say, hey, I don't know the math here, but there's a chance that one of these options just makes things easier for me to be profitable or to lose less money. And just simply, like, asking that question, having that curiosity, is a really, really good thing, and has benefit kind of throughout betting and DFS, and just always asking those questions, trying to find ways to make things easier on ourselves. And this seems to be one of those things.
So let's just take a quick example here. So Scotty Scheffler, if you wanted to do this with Scotty Scheffler, if you just want to bet Scotty Scheffler to win this week, he's plus 330 in this market right now as an outright winner. Probably some of the better odds that are out there, honestly. If you start going into the each way markets to figure this out, he's plus 330 for just a win. If you wanted to play him in the 1/4 top 5 each way market, he's plus 320. So your each way odds, they're not good on that. It's a minus money to finish it. But if you want to play him in the 1/3 market at 1/5 the price, his outright odds do get boosted up to plus 450, and you have the top 3 out as well. He is one of the negative expected value guys when you went and looked at this, but I thought that was just an interesting way just to see how the odds can adjust. Now, I played Matthew Fitzpatrick in this market, and the odds have actually already adjusted on him. He was 37 to 1 to win this tournament outright. If you took a look at his top 5 each way odds, he would be cut down to 33 to 1. Then you'd get 1/5 of 33 to 1. I bet him in that top 3 market at 60 to 1. And then with the top 3 being 1/5 of that. And that was the bet that I ended up making for this week. I played Shane Lowry in the same market as well. It took him from 70 to 1 up to 110 to 1. But again, you lose those 2 placement points or 5 placement points if you were playing the top 8. So there's a bit more risk in that. But I try to think about what happened to me last week. Like, I hit both Akshay and Straka in the top 8 market as a part of their each way. I probably would have made more money if I had played top 3s on everyone and only hit Straka.
Yeah, Fitzpatrick's a really cool example because he's actually one of the largest differences in the expected value going from the 1/4 for 5 spots to the 1/5 for 3 spots. And you can see that in the odds, right? Like you just mentioned, 33 to 1 with the 1/4 for 5 spots goes to 60 to 1 now. I think it's down to 55 to 1 now, but even if I put in the 55 to 1 as the number, we're still going from 51% expected value to 84% expected value. And the really interesting thing is the placements, the placement aspect of the bet doesn't become a lot worse. So in the standard 1/4 for 5 spots, you're getting about 39% expected value on the outright portion and 63% on the placement portion. That placement portion only goes from 63% to 38%, but you get this enormous boost from 39% to 130% on the outright portion. And we should expect that, right? Like we're talking about a guy who we actually see a little bit of value for at the 33 number. And now we're getting him at 55. So you're getting this massive, massive boost. And essentially what this is saying is the over time, you're going to make so much more money on the outright portion that it's worth making a little bit less on the placements portion. And so this again was just a really cool find. And it does mean like we maybe have to be perhaps a bit stingier with how much we place on the bet, because we're going to get instances where we would have cashed a really nice placement previously, and now we're going to miss out because he finished tied for fourth or tied for fifth, and that's going to stink. Or he's going to finish tied for third with a bunch of guys, and we're going to get a teeny bit back when previously we would have gotten the full placement. But it's worth it over time. It's worth it. And anybody who has bet PJ outrights for as long as you and I have, we know you're going to go through some extended cold streaks, and that's okay, because when you win, you're going to win quite a bit. And if you have, a good 2 month run or a good 3 month run, like you're paying for the next season almost. So we're used to that. And now the wins that do come are going to be greater.
Fitzpatrick's down to 50 to 1 in that market now. So people are on to Matt Fitzpatrick this week. It's not just me and you, it's a lot of people. But I was trying to figure out the best way to monetize my ability to pick the guy who comes in second place every single week. That's 4 or 5 weeks now.
Yes. And I will say, Pat, this is one of the reasons to get into the Discord, because I think what happened is I gave out that number before we went live, and people are hitting it like crazy now. So 55 to 1, then 50 to 1, and it might be 45 by the end of this recording.
So of the guys, I put the graphic up on the screen, but it's a spreadsheet. It's a bit difficult to see. So just to shout it out, Fitzpatrick, Goddard, Straka, and Burns and Burns appear to be the best guys in this market, along with Justin Rose and Jason Day.
Yeah, and I use like a pretty strict cutoff where I want at least 50% expected value on the outright, because I know that sometimes my numbers are going to be wrong. And I don't want to bet somebody that my numbers are telling me are 17, but it might be, -10. And so if I have an estimate of at least 50%, I'm confident that even if I'm wrong and it's inflated, that it's still a good bet. And so Goddard, Fitzpatrick, Sepp Straka, and yet again, JJ Spawn this week for me, who is just off the cutoff of the screenshot.
The other ones to look at for me, in the way that I was thinking about how I want to cap this tournament, because I like Victor Hovland this week. I do think his awful chipping kind of prevents him from winning. I can be wrong on that. Obviously, you can have a good chipping week and win. But if you play him in this market, you can get Hovland at 66 to 1. And then what is that? What's 1/3 of 66? That's, I don't know, whatever the hell that is, 22? 22 to 1? 22 to 1 for a top 3, along with the 66 to 1 outright. That's a bit more palatable to me than trying to hammer him at 35 to 1, and that's it.
I think this is the same confusion we had. I think it's 1/5 for 3 spots.
Yeah, 1/5. Yeah.
So the 66 becomes, oh man,
11.
I don't want to do that math in my head. Yeah,
No.
something like that.
Better than 11. It's like, okay.
It's like 13ish, 12 and a half, maybe something like that.
Yeah, either way, 13 to 1 for the top. I mean, the way that I always try to look at this is, what are his if you were to bet him just top 5, what would he be? So if we take a look at that, we take a look at Hovland, he's 6.5 to 1 to be just top 5. You're basically getting double that to come inside the top 3.
Yes, and that is why the standard each way bet is already advantageous compared to just regular. I'll place this outright and try to create my own each way by then going to a top 5, because Hovland is at 8.25 to 1 in that top 5 using the 1/4 each way for 5 spots. So that's why each way bets are typically advantageous, because you're getting a better number on the top 5 than you otherwise would in the market. And you can kind of always see that. There are times where like it's closer than that, but there are also times where it's like the best available 6-1 and you're effectively getting 10-1 or 11-1. So yeah, each ways are great, and this each way is even better. So very excited for it.
Of note for people out there, because a lot of people ask me, what are each way odds? It's funny when people comment that on a video or just tweet it to me when they could just type that into Google and they would just have the answer right away. But that's one thing. So I've explained what those are. The books that actually offer these, most of the North American sports books do not offer this. Most of the European books do offer this. But if you're in America or even Canada outside of Ontario, I think Bet Rivers is the only one inside of Ontario, and basically mainland, I guess Bet365 would as well. Those two seem to be the most popular ones who have each way placements in North America, at least.
Yes, and if you are in a state where you think that you don't have Bet365, check, because they've become available in many more states over the last few months. And so like I was just talking with my cousin who lives in Maryland, and I was still under the impression that Maryland didn't have it, and you had to be in Virginia if you were in the DMV area. And he's like, no, Maryland has it now. So again, if you don't think you have it, just double check that you actually don't.
So Blick's Discord, if you want to check out even more of this or have questions for him, don't steal all my questions. Then we have no content on the show. But I always just enjoy digging into what the actual data is, and that's how I'm going to start betting some of this stuff and see if I can make a little bit more money off the money that I was already making. That would be really good, and especially if Matt Fitzpatrick comes through at 60-1 and wins, much better than 33-1. I do have him boosted up at coolbet.com, by the way. I believe it's to 40-1. It might be to 45-1 as an outright, because these numbers are going to get adjusted. That was the first thing I noticed when I looked at the board this week. It's the first time I can ever remember Jeff and I coming to the Monday show and neither of us had made a bet yet.
I was listening to you guys and heard that, and I was like, I don't think that I can remember listening to the show before where neither of you guys had one. But I think it's also a product of these smaller field signature events, and it kind of leads perfectly into one of the like themes that I've had in the last few years with these DFS contests in relation to signature events, which is we're kind of doing the exact same thing that we just did last week, just with a new course and ever so slightly different pricing. But it's kind of like this same puzzle, and that's a bit stale and not quite as fun as when we have a totally new field each week.
A well-built wardrobe isn't about having more clothes. It's about having the right pieces that actually work together and hold up over time. And that's why Quince does it the best. So expect to see some new looks on the show in the not-too-distant future. Quince has everyday essentials I love, with quality that lasts, organic cotton sweaters, a lightweight or spring jackets, and higher-end long-sleeve tees that are monochromatic, the Pat Mayo staple. It's all designed to be easy to wear and easy to rely on. They work directly with top factories and cut out the middleman, so you're not paying for brand markup, just quality clothing that's built to handle daily wear and still look good season after season. The coat I picked up is holding up way better than the other coats that I bought that cost way more. It's stylish, it keeps me warm, it didn't break the bank. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/mayo for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada, too. That's QUINCE.com/mayo. Free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/mayo. Using a VPN is like wearing pants online. All your activity is encrypted and private, hidden from trackers, snoopers, and data brokers. That is why you need Surfshark. Surfshark can help you avoid dynamic pricing by connecting to cheaper locations to save money on everything from flight tickets to hotel bookings. You can change your virtual location to safely stream content from home or unlock regional shows and movies that might be restricted in your current country. With Surfshark, fast connection speeds are guaranteed across their extensive network of servers in 100+ countries. And the Clean Web ad blocker is an efficient feature that blocks annoying ad trackers and malware before they even load, resulting in a faster, cleaner, and safer browsing experience. Secure your privacy with Surfshark. It's completely risk-free with their 30-day money-back guarantee. Right now, go to surfshark.com/PatMayo and use my code PatMayo for 4 extra months at checkout. That link and code are in the show notes and description. I'm currently 4 months off cigs, and cravings aren't just about nicotine. They're about habit. The hand-to-mouth motion, that quick pause during the day and when you're trying to quit, it's breaking that loop that's the hardest part. That's why people replace smoking with eating, something of which I am very guilty of. That's where Fume comes in. Not only is Fume spelled with an umlaut, which is awesome, Fume is a flavored air device designed to help you ditch vaping or smoking by replacing the habit itself. No nicotine, no batteries, no vapor, just a weighted, twisty, fidget-friendly device that gives your hands and mouth something to do when the cravings hit. I've had these moments where I just normally reach for a cig. Instead, I just grab my Fume to fidget with. That interruption is exactly why it works. The flavors are lighter too. Think like flavored water versus soda. Crisp mint, strongest if you're a heavy user. Raspberry, got some more of that tangy sweetness. It's quite nice. Fume has already helped over 700,000 people take steps towards better habits. And now, it's your turn. Use my code MAYO to get a free gift with your Journey Pack. Head to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com and use code MAYO to claim your free gift today. What did you make of Scotty's ownership last week versus how he ended up doing? He almost got there, but I have my doubts that he appeared in many optimal lineups.
Yeah, the ownership was pretty much in line with what we had projected over at FTN. Now we were too high on some of the guys that Scotty stole from. So like we had Rory, for example, around, I think was like 12%, something like that. He came in at 5%, even 3% in some of the larger single entries or some of the higher dollar, smaller single entries. And that sort of thing is really interesting because we talked about the fact that Scotty's ownership determines so many other guys' ownership now, where it's really weird that way. Like he's not just affecting the ownership of the really cheap guys that you need to use to fit in Scotty, but he's affecting the more expensive guys because as soon as you click Scotty, you're eliminating like the next 10 to 15 guys on the price board. So it's going to be really interesting to see this week. We have such a similar setup in the pricing to last week. Do people then look at last week and say, oh my God, if Rory's going to be under 5%, he's in the best play on the slate, I'm going to use him. But now 15% of people had that exact thought and he's no longer 5%. So I don't know exactly what the field's going to do. I think this week is going to tell us a lot about what to expect in these signature events the rest of the season. But I do feel a little bit like this week ownership is going to be harder than usual to predict.
I agree. And I think that the change in venue could affect that a lot as well, where I was pretty confident going down the board. Now, some was justified, some was not. Chris Kirk didn't really have that great of a week. Not because he didn't try. He was one of the leaders in approach, just couldn't get anything going off the tee. Griot was kind of shitty on the final day, but I was all over Nico. I assume Nico finished in the optimal lineup with all of his eagles and such at 6,300.
Yeah, he was really strong. Sepp was crazy. Like that was one of the wilder scoring weeks where there were just so many eagles, so many streaks. And if you had a guy who was near the top of the leaderboard just because of the ability to avoid bogeys and he wasn't giving you streaks or anything like that, he was like maybe outside the top 20 in DraftKings scoring. It was just a crazy, crazy week in that way. I think that will settle down a little bit here at Riv.
So, but you felt confident in these like great wedge players that were super cheap that one of them could get hot if you were going to fill out a lineup. I don't feel like Riv works exactly the same way. This is a true test of tee to green. Longer players have a benefit. Longer iron mavens have a much better benefit here as well. That I just think that people were more confident, like using Scotty last week or even using Rory or trying to get Scotty with someone else who was good. You felt okay going down to the low $6,000 range, whereas this week feels like it's a lot tougher.
Yeah, it's a really good way to phrase it. And I kind of think of it as like there are courses where you can really ride one strength and hide your weaknesses. And then there are courses that are going to expose whatever weakness you have. And Riviera definitely fits in that latter category where you do need a kind of a strong game throughout your golf bag. And that does typically lend itself more to balanced builds where you are getting players across the board who have better weak links to their game.
So where do you think that we'll start with Scotty lineups again? Because people, let's see, if he's going to be the most owned guy every single week, we should probably start with Scotty Scheffler lineups and what those look like. He's $14,300 on DraftKings. You put him in, you have $7,140 left. What do you think is the next logical point here? Is it just drop down to that $71, $72 $100 range and just go load up 3 guys? Or is there more of a give and take that, hey, maybe that there is someone at like Adam Scott, for example, at 7,900, like click on him, and then you have right around $7,000 left and work from there. How do you think people go about building these lineups?
This is actually like one of the things that I do as part of my ownership projection process is put myself in the mind of typical hand builders and kind of work from there. And so one thing that I notice is as soon as you click Scotty, you have less than $7,100 remaining. I think what most people do is they then scroll to that like exact range, $7,100, anyone around there, and say, okay, who's my favorite player in this range? And so I don't think someone like Scott would ever get prioritized. And instead, what would happen is someone goes down in the 7K range. They end up liking a couple guys at like 67 or 6,800. And now they end up with 7,800 remaining for their final 2 spots, something like that. And now they go and pick their favorite guy in that range. So I think the first kind of couple clicks in this range could be Pearson Coody, who continues to play well, Akshay Bhatia coming off 2 great performances, somebody in this range that ends up projecting well across the board in the industry, but also has some very recent success. So those are the first 2 that come to my mind, but I also don't necessarily think that there's anyone specific in this range who's going to be like significantly more popular than everybody else.
I think Finau is going to get a lot of rub here, and I could see people going back to Max Homa.
I could see that for sure. I could see some interest in someone like Ryan Fox at 6,500.
I like
Tom
Fox.
Hoagie.
I like Fox this week. I don't like Hoagie as much. It's not that Fox is going to play well. It's that he has the right skills to play well here, if that makes sense.
Yes, he does. I also think, people could be back in on Nico now that we saw him play well again. And, if at the start of this season, you knew that he was 6,300 in this field, like he definitely would have been one of the more popular guys. So there's uncertainty there because we don't know, do people feel strongly enough about Nico where like, as soon as they see it, they're back in, or have they lost enough trust over the last few weeks that they need more than just one good performance before they're back in? I don't know the answer to that question yet. I haven't yet been able to look around the industry to see exactly how everyone's projecting. There's so many shows that are going on today. It's not just us. Sometimes we like to think that, but it's not just us talking golf today. So that's another part of my ownership process is I want to hear who everybody's talking about, not just us. So we'll see about this. But again, there's no one who, as soon as I look at pricing, I know this guy's going to be really popular. He's clearly going to project better than everybody else around the industry. And that's kind of exciting because it does mean that there are more options, and it also potentially means that Scotty's ownership will be held in check a little bit just because there's no one that people feel like super convicted about down here.
I would not play Nico at this course. This is definitely not in my mind. And I start to think about what courses Nico Echeverria is going to be good at. This is not one of them.
Yeah, he and Hoagie kind of fit that exact same bill for me, where they both definitely benefited from the lack of predictive value in driving that we saw last week at Pebble. It's easier for them to use the parts of the game that are strengths. Here at Riv, you have to drive the ball well. It's going to be weird. Like we've become so used to seeing this golf course as one of the firmest courses on tour, where you get par 3s where it's literally impossible to hold the green unless you land it in front and bounce it on. And now it's like underwater this week. And so I do think it could play significantly different than it has in the last few years. But this is a course that our model says driving distance and driving accuracy are both more predictive than usual here. I think that the accuracy signal could drop a little bit. I don't expect the distance signal to drop at all. And any drop in the accuracy signal, I can almost guarantee will lead to an increase in approach play signal, which is usually right about average. So it could be a stronger than usual week for approach signal.
This is another course where learned experience tends to go a long way. A lot like Augusta National in that sense. These green complexes are really challenging if you're not used to them. Like you don't see a lot of first time or second time players win at Riviera. In fact, they're mainly all pedigree players when you go back and look throughout the list. I even brought up on the research show, there's been a lot of crossover, obviously between Augusta over the years, but also Quail Hollow at the same time. The first click for me, if I was building a Scotty lineup, I used him last week and he would go on nice streaks and then it would stop. But Noren was like kind of good and his long iron play has been awesome so far this year and dating back to last year, even through Europe, that he plays hard courses well by and large. He was very much in the mix at Quail Hollow at the PGA Championship last year and his like third start back until he completely hit a wall on Sunday and shot like 5 over. But at $7,000, coming off a pretty good week, you always worry about the putting, but I'm not putting too much stock into putting this week because I've just seen too many weirdo outlier performances from just straight up bad putters at this course that I'm just not even going to think about it.
Noren's also a pretty strong putter. Like, anyone can struggle at times, but he's definitely within I would say the top quartile of our putting projection. So I don't really have a concern there. And I agree with you. And I think Noren like perfectly fits the bill of somebody who he's good because he doesn't have a weakness in his game. He doesn't do anything. Maybe his short game is close to being elite, but like he doesn't do anything in his game close to as well as the best players in that category do. But his weak link is just better than most players' weak link. So especially when he gets onto difficult golf courses like that's when he can really make up some ground on the best in the world.
So the other guy that I was looking at was actually Harris English. He's at $7,900. I was actually thinking about betting Harris English this week. It's funny that I'm not going with like these are guys that gain off the tee, definitely don't have a ton of distance like some of the other guys that you might want to go to, but a lot like Noren, Harris English is another player that doesn't have any crippling deficiencies in his game and is very good with long irons despite not being, and you're going to get more of that this week, which is funny because Harris English, where he's not as long off the tee as some players, is just, he has more reps from that like 175 than a lot of players do.
Yeah, he's really interesting for another reason too, which is, we talk all the time about just how incredibly predictive off the tee performance is and how impactful it can be to, being ahead of the curve and finding guys who are about to take a step up in their game. Think Goddard last year, think Thor Bjornsson. In the last 4 events that he has played, now some of those like the Amex and one of the rounds at the Farmers came with limited shot link data, but he's averaging over a full stroke gained per round with his off the tee play in the last 4 events. That's a major development for him because he didn't gain a full stroke per round at all last year in a single event. And so his ball speed appears to be up a little bit. He was longer this past week than he usually is. That might be due to the fact that, he was aggressive on some holes where other guys were laying back with iron. He was trying to push it up with like 3-wood or something, but super, super accurate. And this kind of driving from Harris English, it's making me take note because we do know how strong the rest of his game is. And if he can continue to drive the ball like this, it's just going to let the rest of his game shine even more.
So let's see. Ball speed for Harris English so far this season. He is 35th in ball speed. That puts him at 174.79. Curious to know what he is over the past 12 months in that number. I'm using the rabbit hole right now to try to figure this out. Let's see, past 12 months. Yeah, he's right around the same in ball speed, which is kind of intriguing despite the fact that he's just so much better off the tee. Because it's the first thing that I noticed as well. It's like, man, he's gaining a stroke per round. That doesn't really make a ton of sense. And his iron game has either been really good or really bad. And it wasn't great last week at Pebble, which I'm not really that concerned about. Like the buckets of shots that guys hit at Pebble versus Riv just aren't the same.
Yeah, and I think of the last 3 weeks, the event that is going to give him the closest approximation for the type of iron play or iron shots that he's going to have this week is probably the Farmers, where he gained 1.7 per round with his irons. So he's a really interesting shout this week.
And that he is someone that has a short game. It might not materialize here. I just point to that Morikawa year where he was like first in ball striking and everything. I think he lost 8 strokes putting, and then he came back the next year. Everyone's like, can't bet Morikawa. He can't figure out these greens. Then he led everyone in putting. Like it was just and JB Holmes has done the same thing. Luke List has done the same thing. These green complexes are just bizarre. And I don't know. I mean, maybe you have some insight into this of why they're so, they're seemingly more in line with like Augusta National, and where you either know how to use them, don't know how to use them, or you could just get extremely lucky and make everything on them or miss and 3-putt from everywhere. Like very rarely do you see green complexes like this. They're usually a bit easier.
Yeah, I think a big kind of explanation is just how firm the greens have been over the last few years when it's been here. And the effect of the firmness is that you have less control in kind of every single way. You have less control when you're hitting approach shots in terms of where you miss, because, a lot of the time guys will eliminate long right? Like we hear that all the time. You can't miss long here. You can't miss long here. Well, at Riv, you have less control over whether or not you're missing long because sometimes you can land it on the front of the green, but if you're coming out of the rough or you're downwind, it can still bound through the green and give you that long miss that you really don't want. So you have less control there. Then you have less control around the green, whether you're coming out of the rough, whether you're trying to spin the ball. The ball's just going to take such a strong first hop that you have less control there. And that also means you have less control of the type of putt that you leave yourself with. So sometimes you can just have a round where like 8-footer after 8-footer, you have to play 3 feet outside the hole. And like your chances of making that putt are always going to be less than if you can control where you miss, chip it to 8 feet, but now you've got a straight-ish uphill putt that you only have to start at the left edge. So I think like that's been a theme over the last few years here is the firmness of the greens just gives players less control, and they might have more control this year with how soft things are. So that's, another one of those aspects that I'm really curious to see. And I think that could actually help around the green play be more predictive this year as well, where in the past around the green play has been like really important in terms of you need to do it well to perform well here, but we haven't had much of an ability to actually predict who is going to gain strokes with their short game. This year, it might be a little bit more predictable.
What type of players in these conditions that you're talking about, less firm, a bit softer, able to control the ball a little bit more, who do you think that benefits more than anyone else? Is that the elite ball strikers, the elite iron players?
Yeah, to me, it's irons above all else because the number one thing it means is that you have access to kind of all of the pins. When the greens are as firm as they've been at Riv in the past, even if you're coming in with a wedge or a mid iron from the fairway, most of the front pins you have no chance of getting it within 10 feet. They're all inaccessible because even if you land it next to the hole with a lot of spin, it's still taking a big bounce forward and then just checking 15, 20 feet behind the flag. So it makes all of the pins accessible. It means that when you're coming out of the rough, you can still get the ball close instead of just no matter where you land it on the green, it runs through and now you have to chip. And so that also does help someone like Hovland where you get this contradicting aspect where on the one hand, it's more likely that a player like Hovland can just survive the round without needing his poor short game because he's just hitting the ball that well and hitting green after green after green. But when a player misses, because the greens are softer and you actually have more control of those shots, whether you're trying to spin the ball or just getting it to land softly with height out of the rough, you actually have the ability to do that. So more control, more predictive value around the green when guys are around the green, but you also have the now opportunity to not need your short game if you're ball striking it to death out there.
So someone I used last week who massively let me down on Sunday, could not cash my 5-leg top 20 parlay that I put together, was Ryan Gerard. So Gerard seems to me in a way that he would be very good here in these sorts of conditions. Just like I usually like him I wanted Sunday to be super windy because I felt like Gerard would have an advantage because the one thing that we don't bring up enough in bad conditions, especially the wind, is the best ball strikers do the best in the wind because they can still control the ball the way they want to. They can flight the ball the way they want to. And when you hit it off the center of the square it up every single time, that it can cut through the wind a lot easier than guys that are playing like crazy shots. Like Bubba Watson, not great in the wind, put it that way.
Yeah, someone who relies on spin to move the ball instead of relying on spin to have the ball hold its line is always going to be tougher to have success in the wind with that strategy. Another guy that I think could really benefit from this is Sepp Straka. Just the degree to which he can get hot with the ball striking is kind of crazy. Like we saw it at Muirfield Village last year in, I think, the final round where he went from like 45th to 3rd place because everyone was having trouble. And he's just like, no, I'm hitting every single fairway. I'm hitting it 20 feet on every hole and I'll roll some of those in and just dominate that way. So this is the kind of golf course where he always draws some interest from me. And his iron play means that if we are right about the softness, improving the predictive value of approach play this week, he's near the top of the list of someone who could really benefit from that.
As someone who had money on Straka, it's shocking to see that even despite his approach on 18 that generated the eagle on the 72nd hole, he almost lost 2 strokes on approach in the final round. I can't recall him ever having that bad of an irons round.
It was really weird. And it was also one of those instances where, like, if you needed him to do poorly in DFS, you thought you were so well off on that last day through like 13 holes. And if you needed him to do well, you thought you were dead to rights with him. And then just a ridiculous finish. He ended the week, though, gaining in all 4 categories quite significantly. So he's playing some really solid golf right now, despite that really, really weird last round.
I've had money on him the past 2 weeks, and obviously he paid himself off with the each way last week. In that market that we talked about, the 1/3 market, you can get him 75-1 with the top 3.
Yeah, I love him this week. He's probably my favorite outright of the 4 that I mentioned. And also with him, like he's the perfect type of player for this type of each way, because when he plays well, he plays so well that like mathematically, he's actually more likely to win than he is to finish 4th place. He's more likely to win than he is to finish 5th place, because when he does well, he does so well. And so, you can kind of see that looking back through his last 25 starts. He's got a 2nd, a 3rd, a win, 1 T5, and another win. And so there's only been 1 tournament where you would have been worse off with this each way than with the traditional one. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that you would have been better off with this one. So he's kind of like the perfect type of player that we're targeting with this new each way.
Of note for the Pebble Beach leaderboard, when people try to start thinking about what's going to happen next year, this is 2 years in a row, the first full 72 holes we've played as a signature event with all the best players, and it's simply just guys that play well at PGA National. That's it. That should be your only, like, I have to remind myself of this going into next year, but just like, I looked at the leaderboards, like, these are all PGA National guys again this year.
Yeah, all PGA National guys. And I think it does make sense with the course fit models and with the wedge emphasis. And so it's not that shocking. And yeah, it's definitely note. And the other thing I think is just like, we talked about it a little bit going into the week, but Pebble especially is a course where when you're playing well, you can make a lot of birdies. And when you're not playing well, you can make some bogeys. Well, with the signature event field being so strong, they typically just make birdies, and it's a scoring fest. So that's another kind of adjustment we have to make here. It's Pebble is not what we used to think of Pebble. At least when the weather is like this and the greens are this receptive. We'll see what it's like in the US Open. I'm actually really excited now to see it in the US Open, to see if it can still hold up to this type of field.
I wish I could use it the other way. Be like, oh, let's just scam this Pebble Beach leaderboard and bet on those guys next week at Cognizant. Problem is, most of those guys aren't playing. Bridgman. Bet on Bridgman and Knapp next week.
There you go. I don't think that'll be a surprise to anybody, though. I think everyone will be on those two guys, as long as they're not at some ridiculous number. We might see like a Rory-esque number for Knapp, especially there.
Well, it's good news for my best ball lineups. I actually have all 3 in the PME 150. I have all 3 of my lineups through right now, so we'll see how that goes. And I feel like I have 40. I think it's like 47 teams through in the scramble right now. I feel like I'm only going to improve that next week because I built all my teams with Cognizant in mind.
Yeah, that's a great start. And I'm doing pretty well in it. And I think this past week was really, really strong for me. So hopefully this week is strong as well. And then I've got a ton of Knapp. You and I actually did a show where I said, I'm probably not going to have as much Knapp as you, but I will have a lot of him. I now wish I had as much Knapp as you do.
Knapp and Cootie are 2 of my 3 highest owned players, and I think Cootie is the highest scoring player. He's even above Goddard, who has 2 wins.
Yeah. Thagala, I think, was my highest, and that's been working well as well, because he was my last round pick every time. And so the fact that he keeps getting into these events like the week of, it's making me very happy.
The funniest part is that I went and looked, like, because I improved last week. I actually got a bunch out of it because I have a ton of Straka, I have a ton of Cootie, I have a ton of Knapp. That all really worked out well. But it was all of the guys that I didn't draft for the signature events that I drafted for the other events that kind of did all my scoring last week.
I had a very similar experience, yeah. And the one guy that I have way too much of is Oberg, and that is really making me upset because I've been the guy like over the last 6 months who's like, this guy's not who we all want him to be. He's just nowhere near as good as we all think of him as, and I still drafted a bunch of him, and he just stinks. So that's definitely hurting my chances.
We should talk about the cut line at this event. I like the signature events with cuts. Even though it's a little cut, it's an interesting dynamic to throw in. So this week, it's top 50 in ties and any player within 10 strokes of the lead. Give me this for all the signature events.
Absolutely. It's so much better with the cut. And it also, like, I'm so tired of hearing about like the cut streaks for Xander and for Scotty when half the events they play don't have a cut. So it's like, it's all losing context. Give us that context back. And The events are better, and like anytime you talk to one of the players, you do realize that the cut means something to them. It's a motivating factor. It's a real privilege to be able to play on the weekend, and taking that aspect of away has, in my opinion, like really hurt the integrity of these events, and they'd be much, much, much better off with this cut. That it's look, you still have to only play like kind of well to make this cut, right? This is one of the easier cuts to make, even though it's a strong field. So you're only cutting guys who literally have zero chance whatsoever of winning. This is so much better than no cut.
Let's go back to the Scotty Scheffler lineup for a second. We should probably finish out this lineup here. We got Scheffler, Noren, and English are the first three guys that I have in. So if we do scroll down and try to find out which players in our minds fit what you would want to do here. I wish Potgieter was playing better because I actually think that he would make a ton of sense. But Marco Penge, he didn't hit his irons well at Pebble Beach, but they were better than at any point that we've seen him so far this year. In theory and on paper, coming into the year, we probably would have looked at this place for Marco Penge.
We definitely would have. The approach play is definitely a concern so far this year, but he's one of the best scorers in this range as well. So, like, if you get him playing well, he's going to make a bunch of birdies. He might even give you a couple eagle looks. So, I definitely think that he's viable down here at 6,200. And then I'll kind of take it on a different direction and just say there are guys in this range who are better, at least long term, than what we've seen so far this year. And if you catch them starting to get their form back, you could get some real value. And like we saw, Echeverria and Hoagie last week show you that guys who we know long term are better than what they had shown us in the previous few weeks. They can just spike out of nowhere. Corey Connors at $7,000 really fits that bill. Where
what is happening with Corey Connors?
I really don't know, but I think that he's going to be fine, and he's clearly one of the best players in this range. So I'm interested in him at 7,000 for sure.
I'm interested in him too, but I felt like I just wanted to keep him, like, kind of hope he sucks, then get him to Bay Hill. Because there is something with him when the calendar flips and we get to Florida that he just simply plays better.
Yeah, that's possible. I also think it's only been 2 events since the Sony. At the Sony, he finished 24th. He wasn't good on or around the greens, but he was phenomenal with his irons that week. Do I really care that he's had literally just 6 rounds of golf since then where he hasn't spiked with the irons? Or do I care about the entire body of work the last few years where we know this is an elite iron player? And I think for me, that answer is pretty easy, and I want to be in on Corey this week.
I think that's a good call. And we've seen a lot of players spike at Riv, despite the fact that they haven't done anything to this point of the season already. This seems to be a course where you even said, like, the predictive nature of this course over time is a little bit, it's on the higher end of some of the ones that we see. Like Waialae is one of them. The Masters is one of them. Heritage is one of them. Riviera is one of those courses as well.
Yeah, and he also fits the bill of, guys who just are better suited for more difficult, more challenging golf courses. And like Hovland, even though he doesn't have a good short game, maybe the softer greens and the receptiveness just means that he can ball strike it to death this week and just get around that way.
To begin his career, Connors kind of sucked here, but the last time that they played it at Riv, he was T24, so that was encouraging to see. He gained a ton on approach. He gained a ton off the tee. That's what we want to see. Shockingly enough, Corey Connors lost strokes, chipping and putting, but he is someone that, if you look through it, and you do try to make these correlations, he does play really well at Augusta for no particular reason, despite the fact that he's a great ball striker, but his chipping and putting aren't horrendous at Augusta, which you think would amplify how bad he is at some of these things, but he's been pretty good there.
Yeah, man, Augusta is so unique, like the massive undulations on those greens. Now, Riv doesn't have anywhere near the same amount, but it does have sections where you have to do the same thing where, like, the actual skill of putting on those greens is just different than what you're used to seeing week in, week out, where it's like, okay, I have a 30-footer, but I only have to play it a foot out, and it's just how well can I hit this line? And here you really have to, like, visualize, okay, what is the putt doing? How much faster is it going to be once it gets to this point? Things like that. And so maybe Corey's just better at that than he is at traditional putting skill.
The other one that I would think about from down in this range was Sam Stevens at 6,700, always gaining off the tee. He actually gained on approach last week, and just his chipping and putting let him down. I wouldn't say that chipping and putting is a strength of his game, but he's not usually like objectively awful around the greens where he was a week ago. That he's someone who generally plays better at longer courses, despite this being under 7,400 yards. I think we would both agree that this profiles far more as a longer course than a shorter course.
Yes, Stevens is somebody that I was very much in on 2 weeks ago at the WM because of his driving. He's both long and straight off the tee, and that plays here as well. So I like him a lot more this week than I did last week, and probably not quite as much as I did at Phoenix. He was extremely irritating at Phoenix, where he was in contention after day one. I was like, oh my God, I got this guy at 110-1. Like, this is going to be such a fun sweat. Nope. He did absolutely nothing the rest of the week. And every single time he did something good, every single time he made birdie, it was like immediate lost ball in the desert or immediate 3-putt from 12 feet. So he was very irritating, but I try to take that emotion out when I'm, deciding on my lineup the next few weeks. And so there's a good chance he finds his way back into my lineup this week.
So of the 6K guys, let's just run through the 6K guys and figure out the ones that we actually like. I'll give you a yes or no, and just off the top of your head, first impressions. Daniel Berger?
No.
No for me. Jacob Bridgman? No for me.
No.
Hisatune, Cuss, one and done pick this week. No for me.
No for me.
Tony Finau? No for me.
Also no.
Stevens? Yes for me.
Yes.
Grazerman? Yes for me.
Yes, he's such a good scorer.
Denny McCarthy? No.
No.
Rico Hoey? Maybe.
I don't want to agree with you every single time, but maybe is such a good answer here. I'll go yes.
I think Hoey depends on how many lineups that you want to play.
Yeah, I think you can also skill set stack him where you play him in lineups where you have other guys who would benefit if accuracy is more predictive than usual, and you have the chance to just ball strike it to death and not need the short game.
But since the Farmers, like, his approach play was excellent at the Farmers. His approach play was very good in Phoenix. His approach play last week suffered, but I don't put him on being like lights out from 100 yards and in. I like him hitting his fairways and hitting his long irons.
Agreed.
But like, can he ever putt? The answer is no. The answer is he cannot actually putt at all.
He definitely cannot, but he might still be able to just gain enough everywhere else.
Harmon, McCarty, McGreevy, any of those guys?
McCarty, yes.
Okay, why?
And McGreevy as well.
Okay, how come?
Just really, really accurate off the tee. Now, I did say that I think accuracy could be the part of driving that suffers a little bit this week, and so I'm definitely less in on McGreevy as I am on McCarty.
Okay, so yes to McCarty, maybe to McGreevy. Ryan Fox, it sounded like we both liked him.
Yes.
How about Aaron Rai, who I bet on to win last week? He lost 4 strokes putting in the first 4 holes last week.
Is Rai just worse Hoey? Because Hoey's ball striking is actually a little bit better, especially distance-wise, and neither of them can putt?
I would say yes, but I've seen Aaron Rai. It's not so much the putting, it's that Aaron Rai used to be somewhat elite around the greens, and just so far this season, he's lost that. And maybe it's early in the season. It's 2 events. Like you said, like 6 rounds for Corey Connors and he sucked. Does that mean he sucks now? Probably not. It's 2 tournaments for Aaron Rai where he's just been brutal around the greens. That's not necessary. Like when you take a look at his overall like history and profile, he's great around the greens.
Yep, that's a good point. Definitely a distinction between the two there.
And his iron play hasn't been bad. It's not been like elite levels of Aaron Rai iron play that we've seen, but it's Sony, like he was up above 2 for that tournament. He was kind of shitty last week, but most of that I feel like came in round 1. Like his round 1 last week was just really, sorry, his round 3, he lost 2.5 strokes on approach. He gained in the other 3 rounds on approach pretty well too.
Yeah, I will definitely say I'm more interested in him on courses where it's like very clear that distance is not that important and accuracy is super important. So like we've seen him spike at the Players. That's no accident because that is the ultimate. You don't need distance, but you better drive the ball accurately there. Golf course. So that's when I will use Aaron Rai.
Kevin Yu?
I was going to ask you about him if you didn't ask me about him. I have no idea what to think of this guy right now. He's still projecting fairly well in our models over at FTN, but he might be totally broken. And
yeah.
he hit a drive on, I think it was 10 this past week, where he missed the beach. It went into the ocean. He missed the entire beach. It was that far right. So yeah, he might be broken. I don't know what to think of him right now.
So since he had a nice little run through the beginning of the swing season and doing his normal stuff, like great tee to green, whatever, but since I guess Scotland last year, starting at the Open Championship, like he was pretty reliably one of the best players off the tee and one of like not always the most consistent approach player, but very good with his irons. And he just lost his irons all of a sudden. Like he's just been in the negatives, and that was his big thing. And now it's even more pronounced. Like he came through the swing season because he was still driving the ball and putting really well. Sanderson Farms, boom. Bay Current top 20, Utah top 20, 3 top 20s. Since then, he has missed every cut, and then he played last week's signature event and came basically dead last.
And it's not just the irons. The accuracy off the tee is gone. So it feels to me like he has a swing issue that he cannot for the life of him figure out. And I think we're probably better off just waiting for him to figure it out and to actually see signs that both of those aspects, both the accuracy off the tee and the approach play, is coming around before we jump back in.
Sand saves and long irons, the Michael Kim calling card at $6,400. Had he have not made a 10 on 18 in the final round, our guy would have finished a lot better last week.
Yeah, I could be tucked into Kim for sure.
So I'm always leaning Michael Kim on this show. So anyone else below him? We mentioned Penge, Novak maybe?
Novak, just on a pure talent bet, where I think that he will find his way back, and I definitely like him more on tough courses. I also think Valimaki is interesting because he continues to project like decently well for us, and whenever he does well, he makes a ton of birdies. So always interested in that type of player.
Andrew Novak, T13 here last year. There was no tournament here last year, so just keep that in mind as you're going through the notes. Valimaki is always interesting to me because I see him more as like a wedge and putter, where his off the tee is like legitimately bad most of the time. Like he can't hit fairways. He's not super long. He gets away with it on courses where you can get away with it. Do you think this is a course where you can spray it around if you want to, if you're not a super bomber?
Usually the answer is definitely not, because you need to hit fairways so that you can spin the ball into these super firm greens. Because it's softer this year, I do think there's a chance for that, where we could see like all of the accuracy boosted signal disappear, and that just go to distance, where you're better off just bombing it into the rough and playing from there, because you're going to be able to stop the ball out of the rough no problem this week. So
but I would lean that way then, and I agree with you. I think that just I don't want to say the Bryson at Wingfoot approach is the approach to play here, but I think you can get away with that here. Valimaki can't even do that. He's not long enough.
Yeah, that's a good point. The only other thing I'd say to that is like there are enough trees and difficult bunkers where it's not like the only thing that you can possibly do off the tee on a miss is land in the rough and be totally fine coming into the greens. Like you do still need to hit the ball accurately off the tee to give yourself opportunities with the irons. But I think it's very likely that we see the accuracy signal dip at least a little bit, and most of that is going to go to approach play this week.
So last two I want to give you here. So Penge, yes or no? Colley, yes or no? And I guess Lucas Glover, yes or no?
I would take Penge out of those three.
Okay, so here's what we've kind of come up with. Penge, maybe Michael Kim, Ryan Fox, Matt McCarty, Grazerman, maybe Rico Hoey, Sam Stevens. That's the collection of 6K guys.
Agreed.
So if we go to Penge, we can afford a little bit more. So to finish out the Scotty lineup, Scheffler, Noren, English, Connors. Would you go Grazerman or Stevens, do you think? Or would you want to go down to a Ryan Fox and try to get a little bit more money?
I think I lean Stevens still. Grazerman has the edge in scoring, so like when he does well, he's probably gonna do better. But I like the way Stevens drives the ball here, and Grazerman can really kill you off the tee. So
the difference would be that a 2v2 would be like Stevens leaves you either with like Homa, Poston, Wyndham Clark, Thigala, that level of player. If you drop to Ryan Fox in this spot, you can get up to Gerard, Kitayama, or Pearson Coody.
Yeah, I think Coody might be far enough ahead of those $7,100 guys that it's worth dropping down to Fox.
Is Coody better than Gerard, though, at a course like this? Like, Coody's not the best iron player in the world.
No, but I think given what we just talked about with like the potential for distance to matter more, and he actually is accurate off the tee, he's really accurate off the tee, I do give the edge to Coody. He's also a better putter than Gerard, even though he's not a great putter in his own right.
I find it's weird with Pearson Coody. Pearson Coody, he's either great or kind of mediocre on the greens. Like he can get super hot.
Yes, absolutely agree with that.
So yeah, let's go with that. Scheffler, Noren, English, Connors, Cootie, Fox as a lineup. I think that'll be a somewhat unique Scheffler lineup if there ever was one.
I do, and I'll say this is a stronger lineup than the Scotty lineups in weeks past.
Is that because of the guys that were able to fit in, or just because of the price point, or because of the price plus the course fit?
I think it's a little bit of both, yeah. And it's also because there are guys that I feel very strongly about, like Corey Connors especially. He's the main one here, where I think his current form, and again, it's literally 6 rounds that we're talking about. His current form is going to keep people off of him. And so I think like he's one of the larger ownership inefficiencies this week. Hopefully I'm not talking that out of existence like I did with Rose last week, but as long as he stays low, like that's one of the larger ownership inefficiencies. And so it's easier to then build with Scotty lineups because we actually have this potential separator with him. Whereas in the past weeks is like, yeah, I can find low owned guys, but I can't find anybody low owned to play with Scotty that I actually feel really good about. And so that to me is why this is a lot better.
Corey Connors 200 to 1 with the top 3 each way.
That's interesting. Let me look at what I had in the
if you play him in the 1/8 market, just for reference, so 200 to 1 with a top 3 at 1/5, 90 to 1 with a top. I mean, I would the top 8 on the 90 is probably the better bet because he seems like he's far more likely to come in 7th.
Yeah, if there's somebody that we want to ignore the math on, it's probably him. But the math is saying 45% expected value on the traditional, 81% on this 1/5 for 3 spots at 200 to 1. So I think I'll be in on that Connors number at 200.
All right, I'm going to write down Connors 200. Say we're building a car. See, this is kind of fun because I've only invested in 2 players so far this week, and it was Fitz and Lowry. That I think I found like some English here, maybe some Corey Connors a bit deeper down the board. Maybe I'm trying to find a way to get to Rory is how this all figures out. So we should probably start building. We think about single entry lineups or just different type of balanced lineups. I love Rory this week. I think everyone's going to love Rory, but the fact that he hasn't won here is shocking to me.
Agreed. And this is the most fascinating ownership conversation, I think, of the week is what the heck is the field going to do with Rory? Because it's really easy in hindsight to explain why he fell so much in ownership last week, where he's in this like no man's land of pricing where you get a little bit of the Scotty vibes where you feel like you're missing out on so much if you include him. And obviously he's not as high probability of a play as Scotty. And so people just didn't use him because they still viewed it as like, do I get Rory and one other good player, or do I just load up on like 4 studs that I can fit in the 9K range and 8K range? So like this week, Siwoo Kim, Chris Gotterup, Matt Fitzpatrick, like that's such an easy start. Hideki Matsuyama, where you can't use Rory and 3 of those guys. And it's so easy to build a lineup with 3 of those guys otherwise. So like here, you have Rory, Siwoo, Fitz. That's still comfortable. You can still do this pretty easily. But as soon as you click one more, like now you're stuck in the low 6Ks if you can even do that. So
yeah, like you would have to go. I mean, I don't mind. I think I say this every week. I don't mind Cam Young here, but Siwoo is going to be I don't think Siwoo is going to be popular at all after what he did last week, especially getting out to the hot start, then feeling like everyone got burned by him. But with the way that he's playing, he sets up great here.
Yeah, I'm not sure what people think because he did play pretty well on the last day at least. Now I do think we kind of talked last week about how shocking it is that Siwoo has become such a consistent player. And so maybe the fact that he had one bad event will kind of immediately just break that illusion for people. Cause I think we all knew that, like, it's not going to continue where he just top 5s every single week. And so maybe he will crash in ownership as a result of that. But regardless, I think the greater point here is that anybody who's looking at the pricing, they're going to be able to find a number of guys in the 9K range, 8K range that they really, really, really like. And so the question is, do they load up on that range when they're not using Scotty, or do they go to Rory and now they're forced to pick their 1 or 2 favorite from that range? I really don't know the answer. And I think a big part of that answer is going to be how many people just use last week's low ownership to say, if he's going to be that low end again, I'm locking him in and going from there.
Is there a chance he's a better bet than DraftKings play?
Rory?
Yeah. Because
I don't think
in
so.
that top 3 market, it gets his odds up to 18-1. I'd feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I just think the chance that he's going to be really low owned makes him such a great DFS play. Where, like, look, if he's 15%, like, it's not like he's a bad play. If he's 5% like he was last week and we don't use him, we're going to think we're like, I can tell you, I will say, wow, Alex, you're an idiot. You knew he was going to be 5. You knew there was a chance he was going to be 5% again. He's a great scorer. He fits the course. He projects well. Why didn't you use him? It's easy enough to fit him. Like, that's just such a dumb decision to not use him when you knew there was a chance he'd be 5%. Now, again, that doesn't mean he's going to be 5%. There's a good chance he's 15%, maybe even 20%. But if that's the outcome, I don't think he's a bad play. So I think he's probably better as a DFS play than outright bet, especially if we have so many of these each way guys who are, 50-1 to 200-1, where I don't need to also add an 18 at that point. But
Well, it depends on how many of them that you take, I suppose, would end up being the answer to that. I guess Lowry's at 78 too. I can fit him in Straka. Like with Rory, you can go Rory, English, Fitz, Straka, Cootie, Gerard if you wanted to. You could even throw that out, get rid of Fitz, I suppose, throw in Lowry, and then you can get back to 8,000 and build like almost a super balanced lineup. Rory, English, Gerard, Scott, Straka, Lowry as a part of this team.
yeah, this is cool. So this is a really interesting kind of like type of strategy discussion that I'd have in the Discord, where this type of build really helps you against Scotty builds where you're no longer asking Rory to beat Scotty. Whereas if you chose Rory, like 9K guy, and then the next 4 were all guys that are likely to go into Scotty builds.
Yeah, you're basically building the 2v2. So let's say you go Rory Morikawa, and that leaves you with 73. That's the difference in a 2v2 between Scotty and Norin, basically.
Exactly the point I'm trying to make.
And the same 4 guys.
Yes. Whereas the one you just built where it's Rory to a bunch of 7900s, it's not a 2v2 off of Scotty lineups. It's a 5v5 off Scotty lineups. That definitely helps you because it doesn't ask Rory to go beat Scotty in the same way that the other type of lineup does. This is more about English, Lowry, Straka, and Scott beating the,
Grazerman, Stevens.
Grazerman, Connors, Stevens kind of grouping that we had earlier. So yeah, this is a really solid build. And it's the kind of thing that I love talking about.
So you can go Rory one or two ways there. How would you think if you were building a single entry lineup, which way would you go? Would you go with one of those 2 guys, or would you just take a look at this board and be like, you know what? Xander is $9,800. Not a bad start. You could start with Hideki at 95 and build a super team. I do think because there is a cut in this event, your bottom guys, I feel, matter a little bit more this week than they did last week.
Yes, agree there. I think I don't have a strong answer yet for you. The key for me is going to be once we have ownership projections, we have the GPP scores over at FTN. Are there guys in the 9K range who are popping as not just good plays because they project really well, but good plays because they project really well at much lower ownership than they deserve? If we have those types of guys, I'm going to prefer that type of build. If the ownership inefficiencies are more common in the 7K range or 6K range, then I'll look more at the Rory or Scotty builds.
So the lineup that I just clicked on 6 guys all in this range. So Victor being the most expensive guy. So Victor, Burns, Fitzpatrick, Lowry, Straka, McNeely. So no one more than 9,000, no one lower than $7,800. Feels like it has a good floor. Feels like your 6 of 6 percentage would be pretty high with this. And weirdly, I think the 2 times that we saw this tournament as a signature event, there was always 1 or 2 guys at like 25% owned who missed the cut, which is always hilarious to throw a big wrinkle into all of this. But do you think that this is too conservative of a lineup for a tournament like this?
No, I don't. This type of lineup is really strong as long as they're not all high owned, right? You need somebody who's low owned who can help you separate from
Lowry.
the field. But yeah, I mean, this is
Well,
like,
hold on. Let me think through this for a second, though. If we expect Scotty to be highly owned, so let's give just a pure guesstimate. No one's going to hold you to the Scheffler ownership here. Let's say 30%. Does that seem fair?
I would have said 25, but yeah, 25 to 30 is really solid.
Okay, and what's Rory? 10 to 15? Let's say 15?
Yeah.
So between them, they'll have 40, let's say, or 45. Mm-hmm. That means Hovland, Burns, Fitzpatrick just simply can't be that owned.
Correct. So I think I think you're going to get decent ownership, especially because of the guys you clicked, like Hovland and Burns, especially. I could, I, I'm guessing that Straka and Fitz are going to be two of the most popular plays on the slate. Could be wrong about that, but that's my guess. I'll tell you this much: if they're not, I'll be using them both because they project really really well for us.
Fitz, I could see more than Straka. I think that when people think about Straka, this is not the type of course where they think about him at.
That's possible. That's definitely possible. To me, like it's just the quality of player, the way that he has shown us he can not just spike and give us a top 5, but actually win in a field like this is just so intriguing at $7,800. And like I said, he projects really well for us. So,
if we had to build sort of the chalky version of that type of lineup, what do you think that would look like? Does it start with Cantlay? Or is Cantlay the second man in on it? Because people are going to love Cantlay this week. They'll all talk about how they don't love Cantlay, yet they will bet Cantlay and use Cantlay on DraftKings.
Man, I'm having such a hard time identifying who people are going to like the most up here. I think projections are still going to really, really like Siwoo Kim. I think Gotterup is going to be very popular.
Gotterup should be popular, especially at a course like this.
He absolutely should be popular. Yeah. So why don't we start with Gotterup and Fitz?
And then work backwards from there. So
yes.
88 and 84 for Gotterup and Fitz.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a cool point right there. Is like we don't always need to start at the top because the field isn't necessarily starting at the top. The field typically is going to start with the plays that they have the most conviction on. If that's Fitzpatrick and Gotterup, they'll start there, and then they'll take whatever star that they're left with that they still feel good about.
Cam Young, Cantlay. People are going to like Knapp too, even at that price. You know who no one's going to like? Ricky Fowler.
It's weird because like Knapp is simultaneously going to project really well and is the guy who is playing really, really good golf that people just enjoy, like continuing back until he fails them. But also he's now at a price where you look at his name versus the guys around him and you just say, all of the guys around him have had more sustained success over the last few years. Why would I use Knapp there? So he's got these like two like really, really competing factors for his ownership where I could see him slipping through the cracks around these guys. I could also see him just continuing to be one of the most popular.
Well, Henley was going to be my answer to that as well. Where do you think that he ends up falling? I can't see many people clicking on Russell Henley at $9,600, considering, he's a guy that I put up last week. I used a ton of. He wasn't bad. He finished top 20 again. He was just really hit or miss, but this, again, is not a course where you would think, hey, man, this is a big Russell Henley course. But when you start looking at where he's played well, kind of jibes with this place.
Yes, agree. I think he's a really strong play. I also think Fleetwood is a really strong play. And if last week's any indication, there's a good chance he'll be low owned again just because people want to see. Now, they did see enough from Tommy last week where like they now have more to go on than they did last week. But I think he could be under owned. That, by the way, that's also something we should have mentioned with the Rory ownership is like, part of the reason why he was so on last week was because we hadn't seen him in the U.S. yet. Now we saw him play at least decently well, so that could be another reason why he's 10 to 15 instead of the 5% that he was last week.
I used Fleetwood in the $1,000 one and done last week. Turned out okay. I'll take a T4 in a signature event.
Yeah, that was strong. He's just such a solid player.
Is he too much money on DraftKings, though, is the thing?
I don't think so. He's very clearly the second best projected player now in our model, and he's he's still a full $1,000 cheaper than Rory. So I think you could say he's maybe a little bit overpriced compared to like the best projected guys in the 8K range or low nines because he's 10-3 and that is a significant difference. But that just means like you can play all of them together, I think, and not that you have to choose between them.
So with Gotterup and Fitzpatrick in this lineup to start with, is this a spot where we then turn to Cantlay or Cam Young, Siwoo, one of those guys? Do we go up to a Fleetwood, Xander? It's not going to be Henley, maybe Hideki, maybe Morikawa, who knows? Or is this a spot where, hey, who's going to be higher owned in this high sevens, low sevens, add them in and then see what we have left?
That's a good question. How were Cam's irons last week?
I believe Cam Young's irons were good last week.
He lost 0.4. So
no, I thought it was putting that did him in, but yeah, he was also terrible. He was just bad last week, as it turns out.
Yeah.
Two bad iron weeks in a row.
If he had shown signs of life, I think he would have been really popular this week. But Are we trying to click the next guy that the field will choose or the next guy that we like?
Field would choose. Because I think people will go back. Like if people are going to play Cantlay because he's been really good at this course over the years, there's no reason not to play Cam Young. He's never finished worse than 20th.
Right. That's a tough one. What do you think of the field just choosing Siwoo? Because I think his projections are going to be really good again around the industry.
I see you're the one who does the ownership projections, so you know this. I have never looked at projections to try to figure out who I'm going to pick. That's just never something that I've done. So I sometimes you only can think about what you think about, and part of the best way to become good at DFS is understanding what other people do. It's just golf projections are so stupid. I would never think about that anyway. I get that. I don't want to besmirch you making projections. I understand that they fill optimizers and they do really well, but how often do these guys actually come near their projection? I feel like they're either way over or way under.
I agree with this take from you significantly more than you or what many people would kind of expect as somebody who does projections. PGA DFS especially is about understanding the volatility and how to embrace that variance and use it to your advantage, and not the projection system told me that this guy was, 0.1 strokes per round better than this guy. How dare he outperform that other guy? Like, it's going to happen all the time. And we see spikes when we talk about guys winning, like outside of Scotty, every single guy in our simulations is winning 5% of the time or less. It's a really unlikely outcome. And yet we know someone's going to go do it. So it's really about understanding all of the possible outcomes and not the actual projection. The reason why I think projections are indicative of ownership is not just because people go out and look at projections when they're deciding who to play, but because projections are then who, the analysts of those sites are talking up, right? So I'm going to talk about Fitzpatrick a lot because he projects really well for us. He has really good top 5 odds and top 10 odds. And so he just strikes me as a really good play. Because he projects well, he's probably going to have a good GPP score as long as he's not crazy owned. So it's more about like the fact that projections are a proxy for who analysts around the industry are going to like, and less about people actually looking at the projection and saying, because he's 0.05 strokes per round better than this guy, I'm going to play him.
I like that. That makes a lot more sense. So would you think about going into settings and turning on ceiling projections for some of these guys if you're only playing GPPs?
Yes, absolutely. 100% yes. In fact, I think it's pretty clearly the better route, as long as the projections you're using are doing a good job of estimating that variance and actually capturing a difference. Because like one of the issues, especially I see this more in football than any other sport, is like you look at projections for a site and then you look at ceiling and it's like they just added 5 points across the board, and there's no distinction in like the order of the ceiling projections versus the order of the median projection. So as long as the projection system that you're using, whatever site it is, as long as they have a difference where the ceiling projection is meaningfully different than the median projection, then you definitely want to be using ceiling stuff.
Well, let's try to fill out a lineup that we like. We'll both draft 3 guys a piece here and try to figure out a lineup. Maybe I'll put it into one of the qualifiers. Hey, I won like a $500 ticket last week. So maybe I'll roll this lineup over into that to see if I can win my Fantasy Golf World Championship seat. We'll see. Where would you start? You had 1 pick this week. You have first pick on the board. Where would you go with building a lineup?
All right, I will just go high probability then, and I'll take Fitzpatrick at $8,400. I think he's the best value of the slate.
Okay, I'll throw Fitzpatrick into the lineup. I will go. There is one guy I wanted to ask you about, was Taylor Pendrith. Because when I saw the golf tips checker, I know it was at Torrey Pines last year. Everyone bet Pendrith at this tournament last year. And realistically, it should be a tournament that he does well at based on what he does well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if he'll get any kind of the same love, because he hasn't really popped for us at all yet this year, but he looks better in our data this week than any I can remember so far this season. So $7,200, I do think he's a pretty solid play.
So let's see. Where do I want to go here? I'm going to throw Rory in. We'll go Rory Fitzpatrick start.
I love that because a lot of the guys that I have conviction on are actually lower in the price range. So I'm going to go with Straka now and just say, you know what? I'm hoping that Rory's going to be low owned. I can take another high probability play here. And whenever I'm building a lineup that has a lot of these 7K range guys, I really want to make sure that those guys have actual win equity, and nobody has more than him in this range.
And I'll throw Harris English in as my next guy.
Then I'm going to go Corey Connors. We talked about him earlier. I just don't think there's there's not enough of a reason to be off of him based on the last 6 rounds than what I think the field will be. So,
Herein becomes the problem.
unfortunate.
This is like the
Mhm.
worst range to end up in. Minwoo,
I'm very
Spieth.
comfortable just leaving 300 on the table here and going Cootie because I know you like him a lot this week. And
Oh, I like Cootie, Kitayama, Gerard, and Pendrith. They're all guys I can see playing really well here. Cootie's never played here before. I do think that, listen, you always hear the guys who play here the first time never win. I don't expect Cootie to win. But could he be at a massive disadvantage with some, you know what, let me go to the rabbit hole. Let me look at these long approaches. I think that's going to be the calling card for everyone this week. Whether or not that comes to fruition, we'll see. And just try to put these 4 guys in a box to see who does at least approach play a little bit better between these ones. And Nick Taylor's right there too. Doesn't seem like a good Nick Taylor course. Pendrith actually rates out the best.
Yeah, he
or
might.
Akshay. Maybe
He might.
Minwoo.
I still think it's Cootie, but
It just
when you said
is it
when you
just
said
ride the
this is,
form with
worst-
Cootie? Like ride the form with Cootie? Like his long iron play has been objectively bad.
Yeah, I think he drives the ball so well that he's good enough here.
Okay. I mean, I can most definitely be sold on that argument.
And he just makes a ton of birdies too. So like, if he finishes 20th, there's a good chance he's top 15 in DraftKings points.
We need him to make the cut though.
We do. So the fact that like the long irons aren't great, to me, that hurts his chances of contending more than it hurts his chances of making the cut, because most of those holes, guys are making par or bogey on anyway. So if he makes a couple bogeys, that's fine because we know he's going to drive the ball so well. And because he drives the ball so well, when other guys are hitting long irons out of the rough, he might be hitting an 8 iron out of the fairway.
Minwoo actually rates out really well here. Coming off a week.
It's always interesting when he hits his irons really well because they are typically so bad. He gained a full stroke and a half per round with his irons last week. So I definitely don't have an issue just hoping that he bottled that up and can keep it going for at least one more week.
Has he played here? He was awful at Torrey Pines here last year. Genesis Invitational. He was cut here in 2022. Hasn't played it since at Riviera. He's interesting. He's definitely not safe by any means. Like he feels like a guy who could be in last place. Maybe you're right. I feel like Cootie or Gerard is probably the play.
Yeah, I agree.
I trust Gerard's ball striking more than I trust Cootie's ball striking.
I've already made 3 picks, so this one's on you, Pat.
I know. I'll go with Gerard. Screw it. P.S. and Cootie. I mean, if I had a good voice for Ryan Gerard, then maybe. I mean, we could get this lineup Gerarded and make it go to the very top, and we'd be good to go. But this is what we got. We're going with Cootie. We have an extra $300. The only other way that I'd probably play this lineup is I think that the more that I think about Novak, that maybe a bet on talent, almost like you're doing with Connors. I'm not going to change it, but let's just say we take out Connors and Cootie for a second and you put in Novak, you get yourself back up to Ludwig, Bobby Mack, McNeely. And I don't know what that trade-off actually is, like Cootie, Connors versus Novak and one of these guys in the lower 8,000s. Is that 2v2 worth anything to you?
I don't think so. No, it's definitely not worth anything to me because I kind of think that low like 77K guy, whether it's Cootie or Gerard, they're almost in line with like Oberg and Bobby Mack and McNeely for me right now.
I got the text. There's Matt Fitzpatrick, 40-1 to win this week. Cool bet boost under the PME exclusives tab. Hit the description if you're in Canada outside of Ontario, and you can get that. Would you bet a 40-1 just straight up on Matt Fitzpatrick?
I would.
You need to take a flight to Canada, go to CoolBet. I'm sure that the limits aren't like $10,000, so you might have to figure out what the limits are before you go do it. I'll put down like my regular $50 on that and go through. I've also already played Fitzpatrick as a part of that top 3 each way. I'll finalize this I'm doing the live show on Wednesday night. I'll have the newsletter. I'll talk with Keith about it. But for final bets, what I'm thinking right now is I want to figure out a way to get to Rory. I really do, because I think that he's going to win. But that might not be the case. Fitz, Lowry, Straka, Connors, English. Those 5 with the top 3s.
I like it. I like it a lot. I'm going to have Well, actually, I already have. I already have bet Gotterup, Fitz, Straka, Spawn, and I'm probably going to add Connors after our conversation.
Yeah, 200 to 1's a pretty nice number.
It's so good. It's just so good. And and the other thing is like 200 to 1 is strong enough where if he does finish third, it's still a really nice payout.
Yeah, it's paying for like the next 3 weeks if he comes in second place.
Yep.
In second place, I got you covered on that front.
There you go. That was the other thing that I really noticed too. Is like if you're just looking at it and you say, okay, 1/4 for 5 spots versus 1/5 for 3 spots, you're like, oh, I'm getting a worse number on the placements because it's a lower fraction and fewer spots. But actually, the outright number goes up so much that you're usually getting a better number on that placements, even though you are losing the spots. So I think that's another reason why that graded out so well is just like as this fantastic new each way that we have.
If you want to ask Blickle some more questions, join Alex's Discord, the Blink Discord. You can find the link down in the description right now. Highly suggest you go join. Hey, maybe you'll run into me in there as well. If you do want to run into more of me, live, 8 p.m. Eastern time on Mayo Media Network, answering your questions. Do about half an hour, 40 minutes. I get frustrated, yell at people, and then I apologize, and I keep on moving on. Basically what you would expect from the Pat Mayo experience. So if that's something you like, be a sub to Mayo Media Network, because that's what you need to do to ask questions. You can always check it out on replay on the audio feeds after the fact, too. All right? I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!